Hello, welcome to episode number 53 in this series where I'm streaming NES Programming live on Twitch. Let's get started. Just another reminder that next week I won't be streaming NES Programming. I don't know that I'm going to be streaming anything because I will be unavailable because of work, but who knows, maybe I'll do some streaming. It just won't be at our normal 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll see. We'll see what I can do if the internet connection in the hotel is any good. So last time we got our collision points working on the sprite, and if you remember when we launched the game, you know, I switched back over to this USB gamepad, the Super NES style one, and just had the cord too short. All right, so we have the ship exploding now properly when it hits, and that's based on the collision points in the sprite definition. And what we had to do last time for the explosion was we created the sprite, and then I manually changed the sprite rendering code in Draw Entities to understand that there are multiple loops and build the code to do the jumps, and we got that all working the way that I wanted to. So now we need to make the asset tool actually understand how to do that correctly without manual intervention. So part of what we're going to need to do here is be able to define what the dimensions are of the sprite in terms of how big the frames are, and then it should be able to figure out, you know, that it's however many frames based on the actual width. Once we get that part working, well, you know, let's start with getting that part working. Let's start with it understanding that there are multiple frames, and then having it be able to cycle through the frames and handle the animation logic of whether or not, once we get that working, we'll handle whether or not looping. Sorry, I'm being notified by Microsoft that I can log in with my phone, which I may do, but not right now. Anyway, so where was I? So we'll have to be able to handle looping or just a single play through the animation, which is what we want for the explosion. But let's start with how we're going to define the dimensions of this thing. So let's see. Let's close the asset tool. So we have this button for viewing the collision points, and why did I do it this way? I don't know. Oh, I know why. Because I changed the label based on if it was viewing collision points or collision points or hide collision points. So let's just So technically, probably not the right way to do this because, well, let me rephrase that. Not that you can't do it this way. It's okay, except if you want to be able to do localization where it supports multiple languages, because then you should not be hard coding strings in. But you know what? We've got it all over the place, and I don't know that I'm going to ever have to deal with that. We can deal with that later if we want to. It's not that much text in the tool that I'm worried about it. In a larger project where I knew I wanted to do that, I would definitely handle this differently, but that's okay. So if you say hide collision, otherwise view collision, and then make this the label. And then we just say that if you hit the button, it will reverse the state, and then there. Why don't you like this? Const car. Well, you can't. So it's complaining because it's a constant. That's the label string, and I'm trying to assign it to something that's technically not a constant, which I know is fine. So let's see, where's explode there? Where's my ship? So it's toggling correctly, but the label isn't changing. If view collisions, then make label hide collisions. Oh, you know what it is? Because it doesn't reset the text every time if it finds the button with the same ID. So here. There we go. Okay. Now getting back to what we were going to be doing in the asset tool here. So we're drawing this. I want to put a button on screen for well, do I want a button or do I want this to be what's going to make the most sense? So if we're looking at should put a checkbox for it to be animated, and then that'll bring in some text, a text field. Where you can type in what the dimensions are. Where do I want it to prompt for that? I think I probably want it to be just be like a checkbox over here that indicates it's animated, then it prompts you for the size, and then that will be a pop-up of some sort. I don't want to spend a lot of time building text controls just because I want to get the functionality around this working first. So what I'll probably do, yeah, I'll probably kind of cheat to get that to work for now, and then I can revisit that and actually add the ability to do text fields. But a checkbox is pretty easy to implement, so let's do that. Let's say this is 8. No, we can't do that. 3. And let's see, so this will only get triggered when the checkbox gets either checked or unchecked. Because we want it to trigger based on the change of state. And then we would need to know what the state is. So let's do this. So we'll add that, and we'll say bool check state equals false, and then make that a parameter that gets passed as a pointer. And then we can add that to our GUI code. So checkbox assignment ID Y can't spell. All right, so we have our checkbox. What I might even do is that if it gets checked, and I'll just kind of assume it's 16 by 16 for the sake of, again, the expediency of the stream. And then, like I said, we can implement text fields another time, because I just want to get this basic flow working from the asset tool. And then I might, maybe what I'll do next week is just refactoring stuff where it's not going to be recorded. It'll just be me messing around with the tool and kind of fixing all of the to-dos that I have, and doing that live on stream, and people can pop in and ask questions and whatnot. But we can refactor some of the mess that this is, because there's a lot of inline code that I haven't put into as many discrete units as I'd like to handle all of this, and that might help help organization a little bit. But anyway, so this is, let's start with, all right, so we have our current node, and if we don't find it, it's because it's new, and we need to add a struct for checkbox data, which essentially just amounts to a Boolean for now. Add that to our union. So let's see, the width and the height. Should probably figure that out the same way here. Right, the width is going to be a little bit The width is going to be a little bit bigger because we need to accommodate the black the box for the checkbox. Width, button width, button height. So let's see. So probably want a I don't know, like a 10 by 10. So figured the width times 1.5 plus 10 plus 14. So there's a little bit of a buffer between, a little bit of white space between the checkbox and the text. So now we have that, and then control type is checkbox, which we don't actually have defined. Let's do that. So the equals probably helps to assign. Let's see, all of this stuff is probably the same for that. And then the node checkbox data checked is false because it's not going to be checked to start off. And the renderer is checkbox renderer, or render checkbox, and then add the control node. And then we don't want to change. We do want to change based on the current positioning for the anchoring, so that's the same. And then actually, I'm not sure if that makes, we'll have to revisit that. That might be something that has to get fixed with the new context stuff that I had implemented, but worry about that in a second. So let's get the mouse stuff, right? This is all going to be roughly the same. What's going to be different is a couple of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the position. We aren't going to worry about hovering because we're not going to do anything special for that. But what we do need to do is we need to see, okay, if the mouse X is, this is going based off of the parent X position, right? And so then the button width, but it's not the button width, it's actually, let's see, we want it to be parent X, we want to be within our checkbox, which I'm thinking is going to be like 2 off the left side of the position, and then it's going to be only about 10 pixels wide. And then the same thing for the height. I mean, I'm just totally making this up right now, so it may be that doesn't work. So if there are no buttons pressed, we don't have to do anything, so we can actually move this out here. And this is actually the condition we want to check, because we don't care about, we're not doing the hover logic like we are with the button where it highlights the button when you mouse over it. We're just doing if you click it. So if the left button was pressed, then basically you're just going to reverse the checked state. So if you just say node checkbox data checked equals not itself. Okay, so that will flip it back and forth, and then we actually need the rendering code to draw the checkbox. render checkbox. And then, all right, so we need to render first the box itself that we're going to potentially draw the little check mark on, or I guess we'll put an X there, and then we need to then draw the text. So let's kind of start simple. Let's do first the font. Yeah, so that's going to be X plus what is it, be like 14, because it's 2 pixels for like a margin around the checkbox itself, plus 10 pixels for the checkbox, and then the Y will be just plus 2, and then light gray node. Oh, we don't have. Well, you know, we need some place to actually put that text. Where was I putting it in here? Label, checkbox. I'm not putting it anywhere. Well, that's no good. Okay, so we gotta add a text field in here too for the checkbox. What am I doing? I'm just doing a fixed, yeah. So where's the checkbox? Okay, so render checkbox. Okay, and so this should actually realistically be the context layer now, not the node layer. Right? Or node layer is okay. This is what I'm talking about. Like we've got to clean this up and make it a little bit more consistent, because I've gone through a few different iterations of how this is all kind of coming together, and I don't remember which is the appropriate way, or it's not that I don't remember the appropriate way, it's just that there are potentially a couple different ways that this works right now, and I know which way I want it to work, but I don't remember which ones work in the same way. So we'd have to do some testing on that to see. So yeah, we return true if the checkbox was either checked or unchecked, because basically what we're looking at here is, did an action occur on the checkbox? All right, so we've got our canvas, and then we've got our render checkbox. So let's see what that looks like, because I was totally kind of just making up what that should look like in terms of rendering. Oh, you know what? That's a good point. So it's not just returning true or false to the call to the immediate mode part. We also have to change checked state to be whatever the state is of the actual checkbox. Let's do this. If non-text or not checked state, return. This should be a Boolean. All right. Come on, man. All right, let's see what that looks like. Okay, it looks like nothing. Why? If sprite selected. Well, that's the right spot so far. So is it my position on the screen? Just nothing. Okay, so let's take a look and see if render checkbox is actually being called. It is. X and Y are 1255 and 835, so that seems okay. What is the layer? The layer is the background, so that should be okay. Oh, the text has nothing in it. Did I just do a dumb copy paste? I did. All right. Let's try that again. Okay, cool. So the text is there. So now let's draw our checkbox rectangle. So layer. X plus 2, Y plus 2, 10 by 10, and black. And let's see what that looks like. Hopefully it looks like a checkbox control. Hey, that's not too bad. I think we can probably add a little bit more space between the checkbox and the text. So let's make that 18. Yeah, that's good. All right, so far so good. It is registering clicks, but I don't know how accurate it is so far. And I also don't have a new line here, which is going to make it impossible to read that. So let's do that. The one thing we didn't do is we didn't say if node button equals 0, then node button equals 1 and return false. We got to do this only when the button is released. So else if node button equals 1, let's see here. So it's going to come in and the button will be 0, so we'll make it 1, and then the next time through it'll be 1. If buttons and 1 so you know what? Should have left it alone. That was actually better because of the button checks. So if node and buttons and 1, if this should, oh man, I was setting myself up here for some unfortunate debugging with the single assignment instead of the double equals. All right, I'm glad I caught that. So node button equals 1 and buttons equals 0. So basically if the button was pressed but now it's not, we're good. And then, okay, I think that's fine. So let's see here. Now we're in a loop. Oh yeah, right, because we got to set node buttons back to 0. I always forget to do that. Probably want to make this part be something that's a little bit less copy-pasty. There's a lot of repetitive code there for this kind of click release type thing. Okay, let's see how accurate our... That looks actually right to me. Feels like I'm hitting the right spot. Okay, so now we just need to add our little X in there so that it looks like it's actually checked, if it is checked. So if node checkbox data checked, then layer x plus 2, y plus 2, let's do that in black, and we'll just try putting just an X there and see what that looks like. That's not awful. That's not exactly what I was hoping for. Maybe I'll just move it over a little bit and call it a night for that, because it certainly could be worse, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. I just want the checkbox to work. So let's see. I mean, that's a checkbox. I mean, well, technically it's not checking, but it's close enough. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. So now let's do this. We need to update the sprite structure to, let's see, we need to identify that it is animated, and let's see, so should that change the width or and height, or should that be a separate value? I guess it should be, what we can do is we can add something called let me see, where are we using? So we're using the width and height for a few things. Let's keep that as is. That'll be the absolute width of the image associated with the sprite. So absolute dimensions of the sprite image, and let's add frame width, frame height, final or visual width, visual dimensions of the sprite on screen. This will differ from width and height if it's animated. Oh, you know what? I added that reserve 256 bytes, but then I never used it for what it's there for. So let's make that 253, because we added 3. Is the sprite animated? These are pretty self-explanatory. NES palette colors. Okay, so that should allow it to work without it breaking the sprite. The sprites we have today. So if I open the player sprite, that looks good. Didn't seem to break anything there. Whereas the exploding sprite is here. All right, so let's implement what happens when you make it animated. So obviously it's not just going to print that it's animated. It should say current sprite animated equals checked state. So if that's true, then the thing is animated. So if current sprite animated, you know what, load sprite. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping here. So it's loading the sprite in, and let's do this. If sprite, so if not sprite animated, then sprite frame. This is just to fix up the unconverted sprites. Frame width equals sprite width. So if we've saved it that it's animated, then it won't do this. But if it isn't, we'll just force the frame width and height to match, which is fine because we'll want it to do that with the initial sprites we're loading. So now we have our animated check here. So if it's animated, then again, we're just going to hard code for the sake of expediency. We're just going to make this 16 by 16, which is appropriate for the explosion. Okay. So that obviously doesn't do anything yet, because right now when we draw the image of the sprite, it's using the sprite width and height directly, and the current image width and height is not changed. So let's see. So when we click on the list item, if it is a sprite, we take a sprite, we grab the image for it, we change the current image, and then what we need to do is change the width to current sprite frame width, and that shouldn't have any ramifications on free image, because I imagine, yeah, it's just doing a free on the buffer. Yep, that looks good. Okay, cool. So there's no issue with that. Okay, so then same thing here. We're going to change the frame width and height. So what we should see now is that the explode sprite here should shorten. Well, that was... what's the word I'm looking for? That was a letdown. Okay. Probably have to... Okay, make that animated. Anticlimactic. That was the word I was looking for. Okay. So why is that not updating the width and height of the thing drawn? So the current image is now set to 16 by 16. Oh, I wonder if it's ignoring that. It's probably ignoring that and just using the image that's in. Yeah, it's probably just using the image data that's in. Well, I say that now, but I feel like I remember Tiger using the dimensions. Render image, Tiger Blit. Oh, it's using the node width and height. So it is using the width and height. So, is it because I'm making the change after the image is drawn? Probably. It's the thing that's kind of annoying about doing this immediate mode GUI stuff. So let's see. In here, if sprite is selected, because we only want to do this with the sprite, we're gonna, oh crap, that's the wrong button. I want the checkbox. See if that makes it actually change. Okay, that's good. So that made it change, although didn't affect it the way I expected it to. So all right, let's the other thing we need to do is we need to flip it back if it's if it gets turned off. So current sprite frame height is equal to current sprite height, current sprite frame width, and I'm gonna move this out to here and there and that. So here's our exploding sprite, and we click on animated, and okay, so it's now it's flipping back the way it's supposed to. Oh, you know what it is? It's because it does not, the width and height are, I'm changing, okay, so that's the problem. So I'm changing the width and the height of the image, but they don't actually change in the data. So what I probably need to do is not mess with the current image. Let's see. So if it's sprite selected, then do sprite. Ugh, this is going to be a little bit messy. Let's do this way. If sprite selected int image width equals 0, int image height equals 0. And then basically we need to, depending on if the sprite is selected or not, change the width of what we're drawing versus the actual image dimensions, because that's what's breaking things. So if sprite isn't selected, then it's just image width equals current image width. Really, I'm kind of going through this fast because I want to be able to get to the actual NES part of this. Before the night is up. So let's see. So if so I actually need to do this in here. So if the sprite isn't selected, we just use the image dimensions. Otherwise, if the checkbox is checked, if there's a checkbox check action, well, so, okay, what we need to do is always return back the current checkbox state. So check state equals node checkbox data checked. So the reason we need to do that is because in this code we need to know what the state is regardless of whether it changed in order to set the image width and height properly. But we would want to change, we would want to do something if the state changes, right? So if checked state, so if it's checked, then what we want to do is we want to say the image width is equal to current sprite frame width. I don't know why I tried to copy and paste that. Frame height. Otherwise, it's just the regular width and height of the thing. You know, we can even just say it's the same as this, right? All right, and then we have the image height and width both times 16 so that it's scaled so we can actually see it and it's not this tiny little image. So let's go back to the exploding sprite, make it animated. It just compressed it. Okay, so well, that's closer to what I wanted. It is not exactly right, and I am guessing that that's because it's just squishing it now instead of cropping it. Render image. Image blit. Source, destination, source X and Y, and then the node width and height. Y. That's weird. Why would it do that? DT. What is DT? The pixel color. That's bizarre that it's behaving that way. Destination X, destination Y. Source width, destination width. Taking the X and the Y, it's copying from 0, 0, and it's using the width and the height of the node that was specified here. And it's not changing the image anymore. So let's see. So it is doing a copy of the size of t pixel times the width that got passed in. What is this? So it's doing some clipping work. I am why would it do it that way? What I was expecting it to do is just draw this first frame that we have here, but instead it's actually kind of morphed it, which is bizarre. And then that just broke it. Gotta fix the colors now. Let's see, so this would be, which one is the outer one? It's the innermost one, that was kind of orange, and then the next one was like that one. Now that was, I think, this, and then the darker one was that one. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but I don't really care about that right now. Why is it skewing it like that? It's what is the width? Well, I'm assuming that that's even the operation I'm looking at. So let's see. So the node width is 2048 and the node height is 256. And the image is 2048 by 250. Oh, because it's scaled. Right, because when it got rendered, it got rescaled. So I wonder if that's the issue, is the way that when I create the image, it is getting a resized image based on, yeah, that's probably what it is. So if the width and the height don't match, I think I'm going to have to do this a little bit differently. I think what I'm going to need to do is change this so that you can pass a scale factor, and then the width and the height will just crop the image, and then you can also use the scale factor to do what we're doing here, because now we actually need to, because that's what's happening. It's actually resizing, which makes more sense. I didn't see anything in Tiger that would cause the behavior that we're seeing where it's rescaling the whole image. But that makes more sense now. So let's do this. Let's say this is the width, this is the height, this is the scale. And so then what we'll do is we'll say if scale doesn't equal 1, it'll do that, and it'll rescale it, and then let's see, so keep the original image, free the display image if there was one, and then get the width times the scale and the height times the scale, and then that should fix the problem, I believe, because now what we do is we pass a scale of 16, and now it should crop it properly but also scale it. We'll find out in a second. Nope. So let's see. So that's the scale. So scale, is it just not? Scale doesn't equal 1, scale is equal to 16, so that's saved. And then what's width? Width is 128, scales. Oh, you know what it is? It's also that the width and height were permanently changed that way. So we probably need to save, okay. So let's fix this. So node image data scale equals scale. So that's that, and then when we go to render the image, it is the node width times the node image data scale. Okay. That looks good, except for the toggle grid. Okay, that looks good too. All right, cool. So let's go back to this. Looks like there's a bug in the flipping back and forth between meta tiles and sprites. I'll have to fix that. All right, so, oh, come on. Really? Why? Because I just reversed what I did. So further complications, I guess. Basically the destination width and height. So that it properly crops it. Seems like this shouldn't be necessary, but so let's see here now. So we have all our stuff here, and then we just basically are going to say, forget about this. We just say node image data destination width and destination height. Oh, times the destination scale. Semicolon there. For now, let's just assume, you know what, let's assume that the scale is the same in both, just for the sake of argument. Because I don't know that I want to be dealing with different scales. So, okay, so then the image width and height, and then it's, so then what we're saying is this should be this. This should always be this. This should always be that, and then the right, or oh, image width. Now nothing is changing. Why? Let's see. So the image width and height would become, if it were checked, it would become the frame width and height times the scale. So that shouldn't be the same, because that should become 16 by 16 times 16, right? And when we render the image, oh, well, it doesn't help that it's destination width by, why is that? That's wrong. I guess it must be, oh, is this not getting updated? Finally, okay. And then the bounding box would need to get changed too, so that that renders properly. So if we go to explode and we make it animated, the bounding box is wrong, but that's okay. So let's say if we save this and switch back, all right, so, oh, you know what? I forgot that that's how that works. It's, is there a width too? No, it's just those two. That should be 16 and 16. All right. So now the loading isn't correctly loading things, but that's okay. I think I know why that is. Animated, or I know why that is, but I just want to, we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, good. So the bounding box is now correct. All right, so when it loads the sprite, let's see, so it's animated, so the frame height actually is correct. So what we would need to, well, let's actually verify that. So explode, and the frame height is 16. Okay, so then, and it is set to be animated. Okay, great. So now we need to fix that. So it loads the image data. Where does it get the sprite image? Load sprite. Was it get image from create image? Create sprite. Load sprite. Load sprite. So we load the sprite. it's not here. Here. We then do sprite to image. So we can do the width and the height of the thing to create a bitmap. And then we figure out the total bytes, and then we... Okay, so why... What is this doing? So this is going through the width and the height of the thing. That all looks right, unless something in the load sprite is wrong on the width and the height now. Let's see. Let's go back to this for a second because I don't remember. So the sprite height is 16, the width is 128, so that's all good. Did I call it? Draw sprite, draw image. Load sprite, save sprite, create sprite, is sprite, draw sprite. There it is. So height, width. Okay, so we got the total bytes, and then it is going through the NES palette and restoring the... Oh, wait a minute. Is it the image itself that's wrong? No, that looks okay. Oh, I know what the problem is, I think. It's not checking the checked box here, so... Current sprite is animated. Actually, want to rename that, I think. Do I have other ones where I've... I just like to have it have is or has, just for the sake of it being obvious that it's a Boolean. All right, so is animated. So it's going to get the current checkbox, or it's going to set the check state here. And then I guess what I want to do is I want to actually use the value of checked state if we're creating it for the first time, right? That way it has a checked value if the thing is animated. Let's see. All right, so it's got the checkbox there. So if I go to the player sprite, no. Why is that still checked? Let's see. False. Oh, because I'm going between sprites, and so that's not getting cleared out. All right, that's better. So that is now coming in as checked. So it should hit this, and the frame width is 16. frame height is 16. The image width will then be that. Current image width is 16. Height is... So that's the problem, is the current image is getting set to the wrong size. Now why is that? Is it because the first time through? So actually this is the problem. This should not, that is not true anymore, because we don't want to change the width and height of the image. We want to keep that. There we go. Now the question becomes, did I break it for the other sprites? No. Okay, so there's our explode. There's our explode sprite. It's animated. If we uncheck that, it goes back out. Okay, cool. So that's good. Save that and come back to it by way of, okay. Great. So now that we have that, while it would also be nice to be able to cycle through this, let's just, for the sake of finishing this up here tonight, let's just make it so that now the renderer properly understands how to generate the code. And then we'll call it an evening. So we have sprite to image. That generates the char. That's the total sprites, except that it's not if it's animated. So current sprite is animated, then do that, not do that, then do current sprite dot frame width times current sprite times frame height, shifted by 6, otherwise do that, and I can't spell still. So if it's animated, we're going to take the frame width and height and calculate how many hardware sprites that needs. And if it's not, then we will use the full size of the image. So let's just try and export and see what happens. So that export completed. If we open up draw entities, thank you Windows for finally right clicking. The draw explode sprite, yeah, so cool. So what you can see is that now it's only doing the 4 hardware sprites that it's populating because it thinks it's 16 by 16, which is technically true, but now what we need to do is handle the frames properly. So we're like halfway there already. So let's see. So there are a few things we need to fix for this, right? So the position, the X and Y position are all good. That doesn't have to change. But what we do need to do is we need to check the position of the data variable, because that's what we're using to determine which actual frame we're drawing or which sprite offset we're using. So for this, if you look, we have for the actual sprite tile, which is which instruction? entity's Y position. Looks like it's this one. We're just incrementing. Or rather, we're just using, let's see, 1, 2, 11, and 12. And that's okay, yeah, so that's right. So actually that raises a good point, which is, are we doing that with this here? We're using 1 and 2, but then we're using 3 and 4, and that's not correct because we want to use the offset based on the number of characters in the actual image, not purely based on just incrementing. So let's see. So this makes it a little bit more complicated to generate this logic because maybe we don't change this part because no, that's technically, I mean, that part's okay. We still want to generate the sprites in that way, but then what we need to do is, I guess, figure out the number of frames of animation and the logic to jump to those frames, and then how to readjust the tiles accordingly. So let's do this. Let's animation frames is equal to current sprite dot width divided by current sprite dot frame width. Because with this is the total width of the image, this is the frame width. So for example, we have the 128 pixels and we're dividing by 8 to get is it 128? Or is that the times 16 amount? Let's see. It is 128. Oh, I divided by 8. It's 128 by 16. That gives us 8 frames of animation. So for each of those frames, we want to add a check. We're going to assume that the code will have to do the inverse conditional check because of the range error that we were running into when I did it manually. So let's see. So the first thing we need to do is check the animation frame. So load A entities plus entity colon data X. Was it not called drawing? Oh, it's F def. That usually helps. So we need our tab here too. So we have our load check, and then we're going to just proceed with oh, you know, we don't even need to do, well, we need to do it in 2 loops of animation frames. because we need to generate our jump code, and then we need to generate the actual code itself at the appropriate position. So let's see, so fprint fdrawing, and we say compare to f, and we say branch not equal to the next label. Otherwise, jump to, let's call it, we'll just do well, that's going to be, I guess we're going to have independent labels. So let's call it animation label index. And then we'll increment that. We can do that actually right here, I think, because we only need it to do it at the end of the loop. So let's see. So it compares if branches not equal to the next label, and then just jump. And we actually don't need to do that every time through the loop. We can do that. So that creates the anonymous label. It does a branch if not equal to the next one. Otherwise, it does jump, and then it increments, and it does that for however many frames we have. So let's see what that looks like before we go any further. And that would be here, and try entities Inc. And I'm missing a new line. Where am I missing my new line? Here. Okay, so let's export that. Go back. Okay, so compare to 0, branch if not equal to there. Otherwise, go to anim1. Compare branch not equal, blah. Okay, that all looks good. And then I guess we should add a sort of catch-all for if it doesn't match. And then we should also only do this if the current sprite is animated, because none of this is necessary if the sprite isn't animated. And so we'll do this here. We'll say fprint fdrawing t jump check and sprites. I think that's the label in check and sprites. Check and sprite. So if it doesn't match any of those, it will jump to the next sprite so that it does not fail. Okay, so it'll branch to this and then check in sprite. And now we need to actually create those labels correctly. So then this actually is necessary to exist out of that. And see. So what I have to do is basically I need to record where we are when we start and where we end up for if it's animated, because then we have to apply the appropriate labels in this code here, or it will not jump to the appropriate locations. So now let's see, so animation frames would equal 1 if it weren't animated, so that's fine. So then we say if current sprite is animated, we're going to do an fprintf of the animated label. We're going to say anim %d start animation label index, and then we're going to increment that. We can do that at the loop also. And then this, of course, needs the file that we're going to be writing that to. We need a colon and a new line. Probably want 2 new lines, just for some readability. So let's see what that looks like now. So that's cool. Well, almost. That's almost what I want. That should be here for the current frame that we're working on. And then let's see, so total sprites is being calculated based on that, but we have to now, for the tile we're working on, we have to be able to offset the value if it's animated. So let's do this. So this will become that, and then we'll do our current tile plus plus outside of that, because we have to now current sprite is animated. So we know that the condition is 0 if it's not animated, but what is it if we are animated? If we want to add the number of, let's see, for the Y position, wait a minute. For J total sprites, we write out the Y position, the tile, palette and mirror bits, and the X position. And if X is greater than 0, we clear the carry and blah. Then we add that. Okay, right. So we're doing, yeah. All right, so now if the Y position is greater than 0, it's getting a little messy. Let's do this instead of trying to do this all in line and making it utterly confusing. Y tile offset. And then we say, okay, if current sprite is animated and Y is greater than 0, meaning that we're not drawing the first row, then the Y tile offset has to be the current sprite width divided by 8, because we need to offset by the number of tiles. We need to offset by the number of tiles and almost. It's what is it? It's Y times the width. The width is in pixels. The Y is in tiles. Well, no, the Y is also in pixels. So if it's 8, it would be, yeah, so it would be Y times. So if it's 8, yeah, that would work. That would give us the offset, and then we divide by 8 in order to find the tile position. I think that's right. Let's take a look. So let's see, what is the offset? Is 8, which when we factor in, let's look at our code here. So we have tile 1 and 2, and then it's tile 17 and 18. Current tile 17. Oh, why is Y tile offset so large? Width is 128 times 8. Current tile. Let me see what it actually writes out. So tile 1, tile 2. Is not right. And then tile. All right, so this is not exactly right. Why is that? Because so the way that it would normally do this is it would say, okay, it's (16) by however many. So it's just incrementing this way, right? What we wanted to do is we wanted to increment this way and then increment that way and then increment that way. So we wanted to treat it like a 2 by 2, even though it's not. So let's think about how that would work exactly. So for each of these, for each frame of animation, it's going to go through however many total sprites it has, which is, I think, just 4 is what it calculates that out to be. One. Yeah. If animated, frame width, frame height. Otherwise, my order of operations out of whack here. Total sprites 1. Frame width, frame height. Oh wait, why is it 8? Is animated. Oh, okay, well that's fine. Is So animated. So frame width, frame height. So it should be total sprites is 4, which is fine. Animation frames is 8, which is good. So it will have written out the tiles in linear fashion, and we need to accommodate that for when we do this writing out. And also we want to start the okay, so there are a couple of things here. So I'm trying to like work this out here in my mind, because we've kind of shifted the paradigm of how these are stored versus accessed. And so we're storing, if this is, you know, 16 high and however many wide, we're storing each of these individual tiles linearly, which is fine. But what we were doing when we were treating it that way is we were just incrementing up, which is not problematic for a straightforward strip of tiles like that. But now let's see. So if we count 0, 1, and it's not really 2 and 3. It's the X needs to get we need to repeat that, but with different, with an offset by the width, right? So zero, 1, what is the value? If we take 128 divided by 8, it's 16. So 0, 1, 16, 17, 2, 3, 18, 19, 3, 4. So we almost have to when we increment the Y, if current sprite is animated, so when we increment the Y, we want to subtract from total sprites minus equals, we want to subtract the number of X tiles that we've traversed, so whatever X divided by 8 ends up being, and then the Y offset, Y tile offset is equal to current sprite width divided by 8, and that gives us our Y offset. And so that, I think, will fix it and make it work. Let's see. Explode. Okay, so that's all still looking good. Export project. Let's see how that looks now. So for animation 0, we have 1, 2. Why do we still have 3, 4? It shouldn't have done that. Let's see. Y plus equals 8. If current sprite is animated, total sprites minus equals, let's see if it actually called that like it should have. Total sprites. Oh, well, that's no good. X 128 shifted by, why did that? did X get, how did X get so large? That seems bizarre. Wait a minute. X is 128. Okay. But why is it 128? It shouldn't be because... Oh, because it's traversing the current sprite width instead of the frame width. And then... Alright, let's see if that makes more sense now. So X is 16. So X, yeah, so we get 2. So total sprites is 4. It becomes 2. And then Y tile offset is 0 and becomes 16. So let's see what that looks like now. So animation 0 is you get tile 1 and 2, and then 8 and 8. Wah, wah. Or no, 3 and 4, which is still not right. Y tile offset. Oh, because I'm resetting this every time, which is wrong, right? Because Y tile offset should only be... Well, I guess it would be reset every time for... Okay. But it's still not drawing correctly. And now it's not even rendering this number of sprites properly. Why? Because the Y check is wrong. Y is frame height. Frame height is... Oh, frame height shouldn't be 8. Oh, well, it might be for that. Frame height is 16, so Y is 0, 8, 16, come on, what did I mess up here? Probably something simple. So the current tile, blah, 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 Y is greater than 0. That's fine. X plus equals 8. If it's equal to the frame width, then... Oh, you know what we're also not doing? We're also not adding... We need to do an X offset based on the current frame that we're rendering, because the Y doesn't get changed if we're doing a sprite strip. So current tile offset plus X tile offset, and that would happen equals 0, and what we want to do is we want to, at the end of every frame, we want to say X tile offset plus equals 2. No, not plus equals 2. It's plus equals to current sprite frame width divided by 8. So now it's still not going to have the right number of okay, so you know what we need to do, I also want to, just for the sake of readability, it'd be nice to have a comment there so we can see the value, that very clearly see that that's the tile index. Okay. All right. So why is it ending too early? Y is equal to current sprite frame height, which would be 16. It would break out and then it would go back. Let's see. So for Y is 0, let's do this. Let's hit the breakpoint here because I want to see what this does for an animated sprite and not for a non-animated sprite. So we're at animation frame 0. The Y tile offset is 0. And we're going to say, okay, we're doing the first frame, Y is 0, so we don't go through there. Our X tile offset and Y tile offset are all 0. The current tile is 1. So we render that, and then we increment the current tile, and we have our palette, and we're good with that. And then we're taking our X position, and it hasn't, it's 0, so we don't need to add anything to it. And then we're adding 8, and we're looking at the current frame width, and it's 16, so we're going to go to the next thing, and then the frame height is 16 and Y is 0. So okay, so that's the next line. And now we're dealing with X is 8 and Y is 0. So now, okay, so that's all pretty much as expected. Current tile gets incremented again. Now it's 3, okay. So now X is greater than 0, so we've got to actually add that to the sprite. And then we add it again, and we get X is now 16, and so that's equal to the frame width. So now we're going to add 8 to Y, which is what we need to be able to do to move the, the sprite that's going to contain that to the next part of the screen. It's animated, so now we're going to take the total sprites, which is 3. Oh, not total sprites. That's why. I think that's why it's not working. I wanted to change the current tile to go back by the number of tiles we output, not the total number of sprites, because that doesn't actually change. So, all right, so let's see what that looks like now. So let's see. So we have 1, 2, 17 and 18. Is that right? 17 and 18. Okay. 17 and 18. And then for the next frame, we have 3. Oh, why is it 6? It should be 3 and 4, right? 3 and 4. So why did it go to 6? And then it's 15 and 16. So that part, the 15 and 16, are wrong. All right, we're getting closer here. So let's see. Oh, and it is anim 0, anim 1, and then anim 2. Whoa, that's weird. Okay. So, are we still modifying total sprites somewhere? Oh, current sprite index Y. hold on a second. What? That's current tile. That's current sprite index. That's current tile. Total sprites. Current sprite index is for the palette. Oh, that shouldn't change. That shouldn't change. Okay, hold on. So because this is the loop for the current, okay. So this is the frame, okay, sorry. Next tile offset. So let's see, so the X tile offset at the end will get offset by, in this case, 2 for every, okay. So the other problem is that we are not reinitializing X and Y at the beginning of this loop, which needs to happen. So let's see now. 1 and 2. And then 11 and 12, or well, 16 and 17. No, 17 and 18 rather. And then 3 and 4 and say 13. Is that what I had written hard-coded? It is. So 13 and 14 hex. And then 5 and 6 and 15 and 16 hex. 5, 6, 15, 16, and then 7, 8, 17, 18, 7, 8, 17, 18, 9A, 19, 1A, right? 1A. Okay. So far so good. B, C. I'm just comparing what I put into this manually versus what the code is generating now based on the actual data. 1B, 1C, DE, 1D, 1E, F, 10, and then 1, 0, and that's 1F and 2, 0. And then that's the end of that. It's got a double jump, but that's okay. That doesn't really hurt anything. Okay, so I'd be curious to see if that actually works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this just in case, and we're going to put this in here into this. Oops, no, paste, please. We're going to put this into this file we were messing around in with the changes we were making. Let's replace that now. So that's now the generated code. I know that because it says tile index in there. And the only other thing that we had added previously was the checking the data variable for the player state. Player sprite. So let's put that in there. Oh, and it's generating extra jumps, but we'll fix that. I'm not super concerned about that. they don't really hurt anything per se. Let's see, no reference to unnamed label, 47. Oh, it doesn't like that it's not. Okay, and then range error 854. Oh, so these now are getting range errors. Okay, well, let's fix that. It's not terrible. We'll just do the same thing we were doing before with, or the same thing we were doing with the animation. So branch, drawing, come on. Tab branch not equal to the next label, new line. And then this is a jump to that, and this is, it's got its anonymous label. So what that warning was here about the no reference to unnamed label, that's because for the first entry there we have a label that never gets used by anything. We can fix that pretty easily. I don't really care about it right now. We'll fix it once we verify that this code is actually working. So let's see, draw entities inc, and put that into shooter and replace, and go into here and build. And then we're back to that. So let's see, 5, no reference to unnamed label. Let's see if this is totally busted or not now. Okay. Nice. Well, so the explosion, interesting. So the explosion worked for that. So what is, curious what's causing this behavior. Branch not equal to, you know, it's probably, let's see. All right, well, that's better. So part of it is that it's not, the loop is not being rendered properly here because it's missing the label that it needs to jump. So let's I think the palette information is probably also now messed up, just because we're messing with the counter that it was using. So let's see here. So we've got their one jump there. Like I said, I don't really necessarily care about the extra jumps. All right, so now let's do a couple of things. Let's look at draw player, tile index 2. So if we look at the PPU and look at our viewer here, it's definitely not tile index 2. So okay. So the problem is that after we've looped through all of the animation stuff that we're tracking through, we're not the current tile is not offset properly. So current tile would need to be offset by, let's see, it would only be ever offset by, well, oh, I don't know. Yeah, okay. No, it would only ever be offset by the relative position it needed. It would need to also be, in the end, offset by the X offset and the Y offset here. So let's see. Once we're done with the, so if f plus 1 is equal to animation frames, oh, I'm in the wrong part of the loop, animation frames, then what we need to do is we need to say current tile plus equals X tile offset plus Y tile offset. Where is Y tile offset is there. X tile offset. Still in the wrong part of the loop. Right? This is for the animation frames, so yes. Y tile offset. So basically at the end we go, okay, we're done with dealing with the animation. So the current tile, which was only ever at most going to have in it 16 or 17 for this particular instance, needs to be added by the, needs to have the X tile offset and the Y tile offset in it to, well, does it need to do that? What is the X tile offset really getting us? Yeah, it needs the X tile offset plus the Y tile offset to fully increment it through the char ROM. I believe that is correct. Let's take a look here. That is the 24. So let's see what that looks like. 24 would be starting where? Here? So, okay. So I was partially right. It's actually just the Y tile offset, which I kind of thought was going to be the case, because that seemed to make, well, actually, is that right? Is it just a coincidence that it happens to be off by 2? Let me think about that. So every time through here, we're doing 0, we're doing 1, 2, 17, 18, and then 3, 4, 13, 14. And the X tile offset is getting incremented by 2 and then subtracted by 2 to kind of do this zigzag across the char ROM. And then we say, okay, we're done with that. And that would be X tile offset. That would be current tile, which would be just 12, I believe. No, it's not, because the Y tile offset is actually doing all the work there. So let's see. So it's just going to be 0, 1, 0, 1, alternating back and forth. So what it really needs to be is, I mean, we don't even need to use that. We could just basically say it's however many actual tiles that would end up being. which is let me think about that. So that would mean that we're doing all of those. And I said it was 16, right? Because it's 2 times 8. Yeah, so 16, 32. 32 tiles total. Right? That's 128 divided by 8 times 2 because it's 16. Yeah, so that's 32, which is what I said. So we just basically want to take alright, so what we want to just do is we want to take the current sprite width divided by 8 times current sprite height divided by 8. And we do want to add it, but we don't want to add it to that. We want to add it to first we want to say current tile minus equals current sprite dot frame width. Right, so we got to subtract however many tiles the frame width is, and then just offset by the entire size of the sprite. And we only have to do this if this is animated. Because otherwise the current tile should just be correct. And the Y and X offsets won't ever have a value that comes into play. So let's see. If we export that, the current tile is 1. Blah. Yeah, I guess that makes sense because it's doing well, no, that doesn't make sense. Why? Oh, it must be... Why did it do that? Why is it -1? Y plus 8 if current is animated, then we do this. That's probably why, because we did the X subtract already. So we don't actually need to do that coming out of there. Okay. Let's try that again. So let's export that. Look at this. 22 is the index that it's getting. And that is, in fact, the ship's index of 22, 23, 24, and 25. Hex. Okay, cool. So let's close that, and oh, I closed the whole emulator. All right, well, that's fine. Let's copy draw entities, place, rebuild. Let's make sure we've got stuff that makes sense here other than the extra unnecessary jumps. Our player sprite is 22, 23, 24, 25. Okay, so that is fine. And I didn't close the emulator. Okay. Hey, the ship looks right again. Okay, so now the problem is our palettes are wrong, but that should be relatively easy to fix because it's the current sprite index that was controlling the palettes, I believe. So current sprite index where is that getting incremented? By frame? Or by, let's see. No, so it's outside of this, which, well, actually, that's probably technically right. Let me take a look at the palettes again. So palette 0, palette 1, palette 2, palette 3. These are the sprite palettes, so let's look at the Sprite Viewer. Sprite 0, Sprite 1. So the color is, current sprite index. That's weird. It seems like it should be correct. So this is current sprite index 4. Current sprite index 4. Really? Oh, okay. That's why this is all messed up. It should only be doing those if it is actually a sprite. Did it actually? Amazingly, it did make the change, but the values are all wrong. All right, let's see. That should get fixed here now. If we export, current sprite index is 0. And then 1, okay, so that looks better. I assume that that fixed the problem because it was just incrementing too many times, and as a result, it was also generating too many jumps. Let's take a look at the code. I thought it was totally gone. No, it's not. Okay. So palette and mirror looks good. All right, so let's rebuild that and reload that. There we go. All right. So we are at a point now where for the explosion sprite, it is now animating it on its own based on the fact that when we in the asset tool opened up the explosion, we marked it as animated. Granted, it's still hard coding the frame width for the animation, and we probably want to be able to do a couple of different sizes. We probably want to be able to do 8x8 for smaller items, but it is handling that correctly. We can uncheck that and have it expand back out. We probably want to be able to add a frame, if not a slider, something that we can use to progress through the animation in the asset tool so that we can look at what that looks like. But then it generates code that handles the explosion animation as well as the palettes and everything the right way. Let's see. Yep, so the bad guys, oops. Oh, you can still fire while the player is not dead. That's while the player is dead. That's interesting. But so the enemy flyby ships are now also spawning with the right color still. So we're actually in pretty good shape there. I think what we're going to need to start doing is some of the code that we talked about in earlier streams, where we are looking at palettes and kind of figuring out where they can be reused, because right now we're just kind of hard coding. Okay, sprite 0 is palette 0, sprite 2 is palette 2, which is technically okay, but we're going to run out of palettes real quick if we can't consolidate them or load up new palettes on the fly. Oh, that's cool. It paused the animation for the explosion. I think it did that last time too, but I just didn't remember. So we're in good shape because now our animations are being generated properly by the asset tool, so we don't have to do that by hand anymore. Probably want to do something where we check to see if we add a second 16 by 16 animation, it doesn't have a problem where, you know, some of the counting is wrong, but that was kind of what I wanted to get done for tonight, getting that animation code up and running with the different frames of animation. So I'm going to wrap it for tonight, and as always, if you have questions, I'm on Twitter at Clairvis. I'm also, I check the comments on the recordings on YouTube, and I'm on the Nintendo Age Discord pretty frequently. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, or if you're in the Nintendo Age Discord, there are plenty of other people who are very knowledgeable about Nintendo programming. And yeah, and I will see you Thursday, and we will wrap up some of this palette work and clean up a little bit of the way the asset tool is working. So thanks for watching. See you Thursday, and have a good night.